This is Amanjol, and this is the first video lesson of the series of video lessons that you're going to watch during the course. In this lesson, I would like to talk about collecting errors and giving feedback. For the teachers who are just starting their journey, the errors are, in simple words, mistakes that students produce while trying to speak English. And there are several types of errors, but here we'd like to talk about only how to collect them and how they can be implemented in your feedback part of the lesson. So I have to explain what the feedback stage is. This is a very essential outline of the lesson where you have a lead-in activity, some kind of a warmer, something that would introduce the topic to the students, the context that you're going to learn grammar, vocabulary, or practice skills in. And then there is a skill activity, which basically is a text and audio, vocabulary, bits. And then there are producing tasks when students are trying to use what they learned from your presentations or from the context you are giving them language in. And that's actually two parts of the lessons where you have to collect the errors that students produce. As you see, the lead-in is not included, as it is the part which just helps the students to, as I said, to get introduced to the topic, and therefore their attention is mostly brought to the aspect of something new, and the attention span, the attitude towards the lesson, the concentration level is growing up to the middle of the lesson. So that's why you shouldn't collect any errors during lead-in, because they might not be significant at all. Even if they're repeated, it can be just, it could have happened because of the student's lack of attention at the beginning of the lesson. And it's quite interesting, but the more they concentrate, the more they are trying to absorb and analyze the information trying to give them in any form, vocabulary, grammar, just exercises they're doing to work with the text or an audio. Even though their concentration is growing up to the middle of the lesson, they actually are starting making more and more mistakes because they are, let's say, they're deeper and deeper in using the language. I mean, in terms of the lesson. So that's why on these two stages, skill activity and producing tasks, these are the stages where you have to collect the errors, which then will affect the feedback. And feedback is the stage where you address those mistakes, and there are different ways of feedback. Most of the teachers, what they do, they just explain these mistakes to the students and why they're wrong. But I want to show you how it can be done in a more student-centered way and actually gives much more, it will make your lessons much more useful and memorable while students leave the class. Let's imagine this is a piece of paper which you hold during skill activity and producing tasks. And you have to, I recommend filling it into columns of single errors and repeated errors. Single errors are the mistakes that students produced once, and you should put them down there. Sometimes the mistakes that students make are called slips, and they can be just made, as I said, because of the lack of the attention or because they were really into speaking activity itself. But if the mistake is repeated, then you have to count how many times it's been repeated. If it's more than 2 times, then it definitely should be addressed on the feedback stage. If it's repeated more than 4, 5, 6 times, there is a possibility that the mistake is fossilized, which means that there is no way in the lesson for you to actually, even after feedback, for students to stop making this mistake. But we will deal with fossilized mistakes in another video lesson. So you make notes during all the tasks except lead-in from all the students, exactly from all the students. So because when you work with a group, you have to find something common, right? You can't address just repeated errors of one student. But when you're working individually, one-on-one, then of course the right column will be basically all about the mistakes of one student. So after you collect these errors during two stages, they can be sub-stages, of course. There can be several producing tasks. There can be a presentation part between skill activity and producing task, of course. But basically, that's the parts where these are the parts where you collect the errors. And then what you should do, and that's, I think, the most interesting thing I'm going to tell you in this video lesson, is that you just write the mistakes on the whiteboard, you put them there, you ask students to work in pairs, or you might ask them to work individually first, give them like 1 minute to think, and ask what's wrong with these sentences. Here we have 3 examples, which is okay. It's better to have 5, 6, 7, which will actually make them think more, and maybe there should be several examples of the mistakes. These sentences are not necessarily to be copied from student speech, but rather than just taking their mistakes and showing them in a different context, which is okay as well. Sometimes you can't remember the sentence they made a mistake in, so that's fine if you come up with your own sentences, as long as the mistake is the same. So you divide them into pairs, you give them like 2-3 minutes to discuss together what's wrong with these sentences and how to correct them. You don't give any hints if it's a vocabulary mistake, a grammar, or sentence structure, the position of the words. No, you don't give them any hints, just ask what's wrong with these sentences. They're trying to figure out what's wrong. After that, you don't give them the answer immediately, or you don't do the open class check, you don't check collectively. You highlight the parts where the mistakes are, and you give them time, you give them more time again, and they have to now, if they, for example, couldn't find a mistake in the first mini dialogue, now they see the mistake that it's in the phrase "I agree," which is a hint. And after that, you can do the open class check where you ask one of the students or any volunteers to stand up and try to actually maybe even teach the class, which is called peer-to-peer teaching. You should be sure that the student you're asking to teach instead of you for this little part knows exactly that what's the mistake here. One of the ways to know that for sure is monitoring during the time when they're going to discuss this mistake. So if you actually you catch that someone is really on right explanation of the mistake and what should be corrected, then you ask the student to come up and actually teach everyone else. It's okay to do that like once in a while, don't do it too often. You can do it in a more traditional way, as I said, just an open class check where you together discuss what the mistakes are. Of course, you're trying to you're trying to push students to do it themselves. Don't just explain, I agree, the verb to be is not, can't be used with the verb. So don't do that. This is your last way of explaining, doing it yourself. So try to push students to discover the answer themselves. What's good about this kind of feedback, and it shouldn't be only, as you see, she offers that they go to the park, the mistake here is a vocabulary connected. It can be pronunciation, grammar, appropriacy, yes, formal word or informal word should be used here or there. Any kind of mistakes can be put in this way of giving feedback. What's good about it is that students feel that they are giving a chance to, show their knowledge. they are giving a chance to analyze. It makes them more independent. If you ask someone to teach, it makes this student very confident in his knowledge. It doesn't necessarily make others inconfident, because that's why you do it once in a while. Don't do it too often. Of course, if you do it too often, when you ask other students to kind of show off their knowledge to others, that would make everyone else maybe even uncomfortable. This is a very student-centered way of giving feedback, rather than just explaining them and giving extra presentation, which will actually waste their time, because during this feedback session, they speak themselves, they work in pairs, so you can consider that a speaking activity. And speaking skill is something that all the students, even in speaking-centered classes, they always ask, we want to do speaking more, we want to speak more. And this is also a speaking part of the lesson. Plus, after that, if you finish feedback on such a note, if there are mistakes which they discovered themselves, students feel very proud. Yes, they leave the class feeling that, oh my God, I actually, I figured out something myself. I helped other students. It is really making the person proud of himself. So keep that noted. If you're already teaching, try to use that in your class. I'll see you next time. Bye-bye.